Hey, what's going on guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Soul Calibur 6 video. This one has been a bit of a long time coming. I just wanted the patch to develop a little more before making this. Talk to some people, play against some of these characters, because there were a few outliers that I didn't get much of a chance to fight um, closer to when the patch came out. But now, I think we're what, 6 months since my last tier list video, and doesn't even have Haohmaru or Setsuka. We are finally making our updated and revised tier list. Woohoo! So this patch is going to be the Setsuka release patch. I believe that's 2.2. And you're going to notice some changes compared to my other list. So first off, let me explain the tiers first. And I'll also point out that I do consider them to be in order, but don't take that too much, don't look into that one too much, but I do try to order them whenever I build these, so I will admit that yes, they are ordered, at least in my opinion. Now, Soul Calibur 6 is an incredibly balanced game in all the right kind of ways. So, when you look at this tier list, don't look at it as there are 5 tiers, because that's not true. There's more like 2.5 tiers. And what I mean by 2.5 is you have better and worse, and then you have the best and the worst. And that's kind of what I have here. So you can consider Calibur to just be like A tier and B tier. And everything from A above and everything from A minus below could be A and B. But I feel like that's getting too, too squished, right? I wanted to flesh out the list a little bit. So that's why you're only seeing A with plus and minus. So based on this, to reiterate, in my opinion, the S characters are going to be the best in the game by a margin, be it large or small, and the B tier characters are the worst characters in the game by a margin, be it large or small. A plus to A minus is, like I already said, ordered. Characters can float within the A plus to A minus tier up or down one, and I would be willing to listen, but this is my opinion, this is my video, so let's just get straight on into it. And I'm going to do this like my older style, where I actually go through each character start to finish again, because it's been so long since I made my last tier list video. Players might need a refresher on what character strengths and weaknesses are, so do expect a longer video, and there will not be timestamps because I don't want to go through and mark down every single character. I'll be doing them one by one, so just skip ahead in the video to look for the character profile you're looking for, or portrait. Okay, so long enough intro, I apologize, let's just get right into it. So first up, in the S tier, we have Amy. So this one, I apologize, my throat's a little sore. I actually hate putting Amy here so much. I really do, because I really don't like to admit that she is the best character, because God, I just hate it. But I do think it's true. I think she's the best character in the game. So what makes Amy so strong is she just has such a large plethora of offensive options while still having good defensive and neutral options. She has safe launchers, I-10 vertical, a fantastic step check, or rather a fantastic set of step checks, lots of canned mix-ups within her strings and stances, incredible damage when she gets Red Rose online, and if she happens to get both White Rose and Red Rose, she is just insanely powerful. With auto GIs out the wazoo, she becomes basically Maxi, but 10,000 times better. Red Rose Amy, especially if she's soul charged, just does so much bloody damage. I think it's her 236 A plus B or AMS A plus B move, where it's a break attack and it picks you up off the ground and she stabs you a bunch of times in the air. That stuff in just Red Rose, like never mind Soul Charge, does so much damage. It's completely unnecessary. And it sets up a pretty decent Oki situation for her as well. So she just has such an overtuned kit for offense, and it's offense while being defense at the same time. And that's what makes her so strong. Yeah, she has a couple of weaker matchups, as every character does and should. And I am not saying that she is like the Akuma, from Tekken 7 of Soul Calibur 6. No, she's just the best character, in my opinion. Very overtuned kit. She took a little bit of a damage nerf in the patch, but it wasn't enough to really bump her down, in my opinion, in terms of a tier. Alright, so that's my thoughts on Amy. Just really potent, a force to be reckoned with still feasible neutral, and fantastic damage, Oki, and defense. Great lows as well, by the way. Some of the best in the game. Next up in the S tier, another character I hate to put here, but I really think it's true at this point, is Zaz. Now, all memes aside, like, I just can't see. Apparently in the East, the Korean and Japanese tier lists are putting him at the bottom, and yet here in the West, we're putting him at the top. I don't know where the disconnect is. Now, for the record, I don't think he's broken, by no means. I just think that they're giving so many ways for Zaz to take a very low risk offense, and the curses just do so much. And in this most recent patch, he got some buffs that he didn't really need. The one that he did need, though, was his 4A plus B got tweaked to be a functional move. I quite like it. I'm fine with that. That's not why I'm moving him up. It doesn't matter how much I love this character, how much I see people play against this character, myself play against this character, Zaz players themselves. It just works, is the best way to put it. Like, yeah, sure, he's minus on a lot of his stuff, but his post-GI game is pretty good. His CE is really good. His crushing attacks are really good. And you have to challenge with a vertical because of the fact that he could swat you down with something else, or if you go to 2A, he just backsteps it, and you die, basically. But what really puts him up here for me, it isn't even his frame data at all. I don't think it's anything to write home about. It's two factors. First, stepping against Zaz can be very, very difficult. Yeah, his 3A is a really good mid-hori, but just he has so many different ways to stop you from stepping, or to discourage you. So many threatening attacks in the horizontal plane that you basically end up playing 2D Soul Calibur. And then, to make matters worse, if you're playing 2D Soul Calibur, you're opening yourself up to a bunch of his fantastic verticals, reverse ring out game. Like, last I counted, I might be missing one now ever since the patch, but last I counted, he had 10 ways to reverse ring you out. 10 completely different moves, 2 of them command throws, one backwards, one forwards, by the way, to ring you out. That is absurd. And we're talking like half wall, full wall, doesn't even matter. Like, or half wall, breakable wall, no wall, doesn't matter, you're gone, you're out. So Zaz just takes away the aspect of Soul Calibur that makes it 3D, and it relies solely on very bare bones fundamentals to beat him. Meanwhile, he can still play the full version of Soul Calibur, but you're basically playing like the demo version of Soul Calibur, where you don't have, a full movement plethora to work with. And that's why I think he's so strong. It's not that he himself is broken, it's that he denies the very essence of what makes Soul Calibur Soul Calibur. So I think he's up here, but just behind Amy. And those are actually my only 2 S tier characters, believe it or not, that I have right now. So moving on to the A plus tier, we have, first up is, where is he? Oh. I apologize. Oh, here. Wow. It's alphabetical too. Okay. Good one, Zedd. First up, we have Raphael. So, Raph has basically been in this position on my tier list for ever. Like, he's always been a great character. He's obviously has a lot of execution barriers. He's one of the hardest characters to play in the game. And for the record, that's not only mechanically, that's also just fundamentally, because at face value, Raph doesn't have very good ways to prevent the opponent from stepping, much the opposite of Zaz. And so what you'll see a lot of intermediate level Raph players do is they tend to rely on preparation, which is his stance, where he keeps walking towards you, right? They rely on that to catch step, and the reason why is he's just always following you in that stance, and so the quote-unquote verticals are going to track you, right? Now, what makes Raph so good isn't even the stances. but they are fairly good, especially since in season 2 he got new options where he can now parry like 2As or mids, and so that's fantastic for him. But what makes him so good is actually his defensive game and his whiff punishment. So while he does have a serviceable offense, it doesn't really amount to much. The lows are very risky and weak from his stances, I mean, or some are just very slow and telegraphed and stuff like that. But his whiff punishment is by far one of the best in the game, like by a mile. He can, if you whiffed across the stage, Raph is somehow still going to reach you, basically. um, so his whiff punishment's godlike. His lethal hit game is really powerful. Like this dude gets a ton of damage, and most of his combos end. I believe the input is 2A plus B or 8A plus B. I always forget. Where he flips over you, and he just gets that. Either it's, I believe it's a +8 frame Oki situation, or he just gets a free soul charge into free pressure every single combo, and that's actually optimal too. Again, more often than not. So he's so powerful defensively and in the neutral that you cannot understate this character's strength. And in some matchups, his offense becomes completely unbearable, and in some matchups, his offense just doesn't really exist. So that's what I mean by, like, his offense is serviceable, but it's all about the execution and his defensive game plan, and that's why he's so good. Just has a little bit of everything. Fantastic lows, particularly his 1K. It may not seem like a fantastic low, but I believe the frames are -2 on hit. It's really fast. It's invisible. It's a poke low, but what makes it so special is it's a tech jump. So if he hits you with 1K and you go to 2A and he does 1K again, it's going to hit you. As this just constant loop. And because he has an I-10 vertical, if you go to swing with your I-12 AA and he goes for 6B, he actually wins that clash, you see. So even though the low is -2 on hit, it doesn't matter because in a way it's still somewhat Raph's turn. Fantastic auto GIs, very unique evades and parries. Just such a fantastic character. You can't really go wrong if you're playing Raph in the current game state at all. So next up, this one, for those of you who watch my content or streams, you kind of already know which one's next, and I'll try my best to explain why. And it's for a very simple reason. So next up in the A+ tier, we have Xianghua. So hold on. I do genuinely think that Xianghua is top 5 this patch, and it frankly has very little, if not nothing, to do with what she herself gained this patch. So the problem with Xianghua prior to this, granted she was far from a bad character before, was that her worst matchups were some of the strongest characters in the game. And they were her worst matchups for very particular reasons. And those particular reasons generally correlated with those characters' strongest aspects. Okay? So, we'll get through them as the tier list goes on, but a lot of those characters got hit in ways that genuinely make the matchup go from unfavored to even at worst for Xianghua, and sometimes even favored. So, it's not that she herself necessarily got buffed, it's that her worst matchups all got smacked. And if you're making a tier list that is, subjective in a fighting game, you have to consider matchup chart. Because you can't be like, man, this character is super high tier, but all of their matchups are crap, right? Like, you're an idiot if that's the case. Likewise, the opposite. A character is inevitably really good if they only have, like, 4 unfavored matchups. And I genuinely think Xianghua only has 4 or 5 unfavored matchups. Everybody else is either favored or even. That is an insane matchup chart. Like, that's absurd, right? So she's not broken so much as she's annoying, and just like, you'll never be upset when you pick Xianghua into a matchup these days. With that said, talking about the strengths of the character, she does require a lot of game knowledge to fully exploit, for the reasons that her only big damage is either throwing out a launcher, which generally they are slower than other moves, or um, her lethal hits. And her lethal hits, every single one of them is a read-based lethal hit. So you can think of a read as an educated or a calculated guess. So in theory, you can go full games without ever hitting a lethal hit as Xianghua, and that is a tragedy, but it happens. Okay? She is very powerful at dealing with string-based characters because of these lethal hits. So automatically, she makes a good chunk of the roster become severely weakened because they can't execute their frame data, or they can't just keep on hitting their strings and generating pressure for it. So if you're trying to go mashy or ham against a Xianghua, majority of the time, she forces you to slow it down. Xianghua, in a sense, forces you to slow your game down, but she herself does not need to slow down. Very powerful hit. Very, very safe. One of the safest characters in the game. Multiple safe launchers. A great command throw if you can land it. It's only a back break, but still. Fantastic throw. Her Oki is insane. Easily top 5 Oki in the game. Because not only do you have a ton of options, but there isn't really a bad one. Her well-rising game is great. Her punishment's a little lacking in terms of strength. But with that said, her CE being 12 frames is the best 12 punisher in the game. So it's both a weakness and a strength. Because if you start throwing out moves that are good, but they're minus 12 against Xianghua, and she just keeps CEing them all the time, are you really going to feel inclined to use those moves anymore? I doubt it. So Xianghua severely limits a player's kit. Again, much like Zas, except Zas limits your movement, whereas Xianghua limits your options, if that makes sense. And so for that reason, and the matchups like I already mentioned, I think she's a fantastic character to pick up right now, but she is tricky to play, and she can struggle a little bit to make a comeback as she has a pretty weak soul charge by comparison to the rest of the cast. And like I said, if you're not getting those reads or the opponent's not really sticking their neck out, you're really not going to net that big damage. But absolutely fantastic character. I could see her fluctuating maybe a few spots down, but she certainly isn't dropping a tier. She is very much in the top echelon right now. Next up, we have Setsuka. That's Cassandra. Here we go. Setsuka. So Setsuka is a great character. Don't look at it as, oh, I think Setsuka's top 5, she's broken. That's not what top 5 means in Soul Calibur, as I already mentioned. She is a great character. She has a very well-rounded kit, an exceptionally safe kit. If you're not going for the, the gigantic counter-hit fishers. But she has safe counter-hit fishing. And that's partially what makes her so good. And she plays a very effective defensive fundamental Soul Calibur game. Her offense, frankly, isn't that great. Her mix-ups are strictly relegated to her 1K hold, which is a low stomp where she can transition into a stance, although some matchups do have counterplay to that, Xianghua being one of them. And her command throws. And her command throws are both directions, but one is quite a bit stronger than the other, so you tend to want to favor that one over the other. This character doesn't require execution, whereas Raphael requires good execution. Setsuka used to require heavy execution, but in this game they've actually given her easy mode inputs for a lot of her just frame attacks, and frankly, her just frames in this game are significantly easier than they used to be. I'm not sure if it's just an increased window, or they changed the way the formula works, but either way, she's a lot easier to play now than she used to be. Absolutely insane bonkers character. She does brutal damage. Like, she doesn't generate meter that well, but if she gets a soul charge attack off, it doesn't matter which one it is brutal. Like her 1AA, which is the just frame 1, 2, 3, it does a lot of damage. A little slow though. In soul charge, she counts up to 5, and that thing chunks you for basically a mini combo worth of damage every single time. And then she has, of course, safe launchers to boot. So she kind of gets the Mitsurugi or the Azwel low-mid mix-up just from standing there when she's in soul charge, and that's a really powerful tool to have. Her counter hit game is easily top 3. Like one of the best, if not the best in the game. That's her whole shtick. Her damage is fine until she gets a counter hit. Then it's ridiculous. So her thing is you're fishing for counter hits, you're waiting for the opponent to make mistakes, and you are just exploding in response. So again, she's kind of like Raphael, but if I'm being honest with you and critical about it, I actually think Raphael is a better character. With that said, Setsuka is a lot safer. She has a safe launcher via 6-6B or other inputs, and she just is easier to pilot. And her unique mechanic where she gets 3 different stacking mechanisms are all great when they only buff basically one move, but those moves that they buff were already good moves and they become even better moves. So in that sense, Setsuka is a little more freestyle than Raph. Both great characters though. You can't go wrong with playing Setsuka in this game right now. She could get hit though. So people originally were saying that she was supposed to be here. No, definitely not. But she's only on her release patch, so she could very well see nerfs in the future, which might bump her down. But for now, I think she's a fantastic character. So next up, and I'm gonna do them at the same time because they're here for very similar reasons, is Sophie and Cervantes. So these characters, again, they didn't really change their position on the list much. They both took some damage nerfs, which is fine. And in Sophie's case, her Soul Charge A plus B, or Soul Charge Angel Step A plus B, the Haya that she could spam, it uses more meter now when she's in Soul Charge, so that's really awesome. So she gets to spam it. I believe it's technically like one full less time. So she only gets about 2 of those off now, assuming that you don't let her just keep spamming it. They're both great characters. They have fantastic neutral game. They really control the flow of the fight. Their frame data for the most part is very good. Their pokes are very good. Their offense is okay, but in the case of Sophie, she can't just run a train on you. She wants to more look for whiffs and bait you out and punish accordingly. Her crushing attack via 2-2B, which sidestep tech duck, is one of the best sidestep tech ducks in the game, if not the best sidestep tech duck in the game. Does ridiculous damage, has fantastic O-key, super fast. Although it is from an 8-way run input, and that's kind of where she struggles. Her punishment game at I-14 is 1-for-1 the best in the game, as if you get the double just frame on her stab, it is ridiculous damage. I believe it's 60 or 62, something like that. So you took a full combo of damage for being minus 14. It's a rough life. So you want to play very safe characters in Sophitia if you can. So Cervantes, kind of similarly, his whiff punishment is incredibly strong. His base punishment though it's okay. It's not super great. It's not that bad. He actually took a damage nerf. I believe it was on his AA, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, his whiff punishment game is insane. If he launches you, so Cervantes' combo damage is brutal. A standard 3B combo does approximately 50-55 damage. Cervantes is swinging at you, I believe it's 70 for his 3B. Granted, his 3B is a bit slower at 20 frames, but still, the dude hits like a truck. He controls a lot of space with horizontal attacks, kind of like Zasalamel, just doesn't have the reverse ring out options that Zas does. With that said, neither of these characters are bad. They can flex into so many different matchups, and you'll be happy picking them. And they're just both solid, fundamental Soul Calibur characters that you can just pick up, play, and see success with in a good way. I don't mean they're easy to play. I just mean you can go far with these characters. Next in A+, we have Yoshimitsu. So Yoshi's always been a fairly good character, at least since Season 2. He recently got a new lethal hit with his Unbreakable grab, or his grabs that take life or give life. It becomes unbreakable, and it launches, and he can get ring out options with that, which is pretty cool. He got some new Soul Steel moves, which are pretty cool. But realistically, this character has just been good for a while now. He has so many options, much like Xianghua. He just has such a wide toolkit and so many different ways to play him. So you can play him slower, more poke-based, neutral. You can have a fantastic whiff punish game. You can run an offense with stances, frames. Um, his Oki is incredible if you get knockdowns. So that's where Yoshi gets his frames, is heavy knockdowns. He ends up having time to do quite literally anything he wants, which is nuts. His soul attack can set up a 50-50 situation, and it's one of the best in the game. His soul charge gimmick is kind of mix-ups based, but he also has obviously the Brave Edge extensions that don't cost any additional meter when you're in soul charge. So he's a very good character. He's one of the only characters with a reverse ring option as well. Granted, it does cost him half a bar, or quarter bar. But the thing with Yoshi's is that it goes so bloody far. So if he lands, for example, 2-2B into the spinny spin Brave Edge and does Shark Attack against you, he can basically ring you out from like any mid screen on any stage with a ring out. It's kind of insane. So while it's technically more potent and powerful than Zasalamel's, it has a lot more counterplay. Great lows, great lows, great pokes. His punishment game is awesome. Yeah, great character. Very fast-paced character though. Like his movement is incredible. And you really want to be on the ball with your punishment with Yoshi, otherwise you're gonna miss it. And that's kind of something I've noticed is his punishment requires like frame perfect stuff or like immediate responses. Because if you're late at all, you're usually gonna whiff, and that's usually because we're talking whiff punishment. Yoshi has to move his body as his weapon doesn't really go that far. He's not a short range character, okay, but he has to move himself forward. So the travel time of his whiff punishment frames can sometimes screw you over. Unless obviously you're experienced with the character, you know what's going on, you know how long it needs to take, yada yada. So fantastic character, very well-rounded kit. Very solid this patch, no doubt. Next up we have Nightmare. So Nightmare got some much needed love in the last patch. I think he's a really good character now. Previously I thought he was like an average character, not bad, not great. But now he's really good. So his just frame high, I think AGA is the input, is now +2 on block, which is insane because if you think about that, Nightmare didn't really have many opportunities to be plus before. And when your character doesn't have standardized frame data in general, those +2 frames mean a heck of a lot more for Nightmare than they do for most other characters. Because at +2, your pressure is somewhat there, and it's your turn again. And the biggest weakness with Nightmare is it's never really Nightmare's turn. Again, this is because of his really wacky frame data. You can kind of cheat against Nightmare and swing when you're minus and get away with it, which forces him to obviously use either subpar crushing attacks, as they're not that great, or armor attacks, right? Which may not even work. So him now getting +2 on AGA is a really big deal in itself. Plus also the crouch throw now being increased to 12 frames, so it's the second fastest crouch throw in the game, only behind Xianghua's at I-10, is also incredible because now he has all these new punishment options that like Cassandra, Astaroth, and him didn't have that now he has. So that's incredible. So now going for lows against Nightmare previously was kind of whatever. You weren't afraid to go for, like, if your low was I-14, right? If Nightmare blocked it, you'd be like, oh, big deal. Ooh, like, I'm not really that afraid. But now going for lows against Nightmare is a little more scary because now he'll just grab you, chuck you, good damage, and a free Night Terror charge, which is a really big deal. So those two buffs alone, the +2 AGA and the 2 frames faster crouch throw, are fantastic, and I think that it puts him in a really good position to be a fantastic character. He still has his weaknesses, don't misunderstand, but um, he can be very overbearing in some matchups. And he is one of the characters that has a very polarizing matchup chart, but I do still think he's in the higher end of the A tier. So A+. Mina is next, I believe. Yeah, and she's the last one for A+ tier. So Mina took some very wacky hits and buffs. So her full crouch 1kk now only knocks down if you finish. This is a really big deal. Her 4-4A lethal hit is now safer and slower. So it doesn't really hit, or it won't hit that often once people acclimate to the new speed of it. Still usable, obviously, but not as applicable as before. Now, in lieu of those two lows getting hit, one of her not so useful lows got a buff, that being 2B plus K. So 2B plus K now can knock down on counter hit, does more damage, and it's actually really good. A move that you never really see used before because there was no reason to, but now it's quite good. This character still does Mina things. She still has a fantastic neutral game, like mid-range. She can just blow you up with 2 correct guesses, or she doesn't even have to guess, and she can just chunk like 30% of your guard gauge every time, with, of course, 236 BB hold as your combo ender. Either you're eating ridiculous guard damage or ridiculous damage. It's a lose-lose situation, frankly. So once you get hit by Mina, you really have to just consider what's more important, life or your guard. She could really just run the train if she hits you. Now, if you can get in her face and force her to start using her auto GIs or 2A, that's really good, because her 2A is not very good and her auto GIs are a bit slow. So getting in Mina's face is generally what you want to do against her. With that said, though, a lot easier said than done. Very powerful character, very potent character, especially in an online environment. But yeah, people just don't play her that much. Maybe it's because they hate her, maybe they think she's boring, but no, this character is insane. She's still really strong. That'll do it for the A+ tier. Moving on to the A tier, first up we have Ivy. So Ivy is pretty much the threshold of like the A+A. I think if I could put her right behind Mina, I would, but I don't think she's in the same tier as those other 8 characters. I think these 10 are definitively my top 10. Everyone up from A Mina, these are my top 10 right now. Then it's others. So Ivy we have first up. Ivy is one of those characters who everyone's gonna say she's broken. And everyone still says she's broken, because they play against online Ivies. They literally can't break her CS, her command throw. And I mean, I can't either online. It's freaking stupid. I wish they would do something about that, but whatever. It is what it is. What you have to remember with Ivy is if you get life lead and you're capable of breaking summon or ducking summon suffering and breaking CS sometimes, which again, very hard online, I get it. She doesn't really have much without taking a fat risk. Like 2-2k, while it is a sweeping low and very annoying, huge risk, like insane. The biggest thing that she had to sort of combat you up close was her While Rising B plus K, or otherwise known as Christmas Tree. It was an auto GI everything move that she could control, and it's on paper minus 16, but she could move away while she did it, and if she did that, very few characters could punish it with anything. Even if it was I-10, I-12, didn't matter, they just could not reach her. And that was the problem. But now they made it, I'm pretty sure now it's minus 14, but you can consistently punish it, and that's a big deal. It's a huge deal. So now when you're in Ivy's face, she has to rely on either jabbing you out or using her crushing moves, which all have counterplay if you bait them out. So for example, her 214B hold, sidestep, backstep, you can challenge that stance. 2-2A, minus 12, I think, sidestepping high. Christmas tree again, like I said, nerfed, right? So you're gonna force Ivy to play a very basic, boring defense, and you can kind of just run her down now. And that was what made it so difficult before. Her critical edge, while it is a GI, it's relatively slow and not quite as effective as Zasalamel CE. So yeah, she's still a good character, but as you can see based on this placement, she's kind of smack dab in the middle. And she's just outside of that top 10 threshold, in my opinion. Still a great character, can be very oppressive, but if you know the matchup quite well, you really truly can let Ivy have no offense. So much so that it gets to a point where all she can do is hope that she lands a grab or a low sweep, and that's it. That's going to be her only real access to damage. If you just play a very conservative, concise offense without taking like huge sweeping lows or, slow approaching verticals, stuff like that, you should be fine. Alright, next up, 2B. So 2B also got some much needed love this patch. I think she is a very solid character now. Her weaknesses are still there though. That's the issue. Her weaknesses are still there. But she finally got a little bit of power pulled out of her stance game, a little bit, and tacked onto some of her neutral tools, which I think is really awesome. She's feels a lot better to play now, and having played against so many 2Bs, I can see that they're more comfortable in the neutral now, and I think that's fantastic. I think she's in a great spot. Reversal edge is still really tricky for her to deal with in terms of her stance game, and non-reversal edge options to beat her stances are still there, but she doesn't have to only swing with punishable moves in neutral, and that was her biggest flaw before, was that every single time she did anything in neutral that wasn't just a single tap like 5B, 5A, it was always a risk, no matter what. So, great character. And the biggest takeaway in terms of her offense that has changed is now her soul attack hits grounded, which is a huge deal. Insanely so. Because now you can set up for a mix-up situation. So her offense even got a bit of a buff, not just her neutral. So great character. Very, very powerful. Next up I have, where is she? Cassandra. Same thing, great character. Her 5AA got is less plus on hit now. It might even be 0, I'm not sure. Which is good. So, problem with Cassandra before was that every button she did, it felt like anyway, it was just always her turn. Like always. She would hit like a truck if she had Divine Force, and even if she didn't, she still did anyway. She had a crouch throw. She has command throws both directions. Super in your face. Really good approach tools. Granted, her step catcher's not that great, but still serviceable. But she took hits in both, like a little bit in the frame department and quite a bit in the damage department. And I don't mean like full on 20 points of damage less per combo, but I mean multiple combo paths and multiple attacks all got damage nerfs. So now she doesn't hit quite so hard, and she can't just generate free offense with frame pressure. So she did get hit a little bit in ways that I think really put her in line with the rest of the archetype that she is, be it Rushdown, or that being Rushdown. And so I think now she's a really solid character, and she doesn't seem ridiculous to play against, and I think it was a very healthy patch for Cassandra in general. I haven't talked to many Cassandra players about it, other than a couple, but I think she's in a great spot now. Next up I have Hilde. So Hilde also got some much needed love this patch. She wasn't that great before. She had a really well-rounded kit, but outside of like one of her launchers, she just didn't have much. And while her Oki and Tech Trap game were insane, she had very few ways to actually do it, and to get it started. But now they've kind of leveled her out a little bit, gave her some love and soul charge, which was desperately needed. And so now she's a more solid character. She has more of an offensive game plan now. Um, her regalia is a bit more streamlined. Previously, it felt like, oh, I conveniently have regalia. I'm just going to use it this one way. But now there's a little more flexibility to the regalia in general in terms of how you get it and how you use it. And I think that's awesome. So, very solid character. Next up, I have Taki. So, Taki didn't change much from patch to patch, but the biggest takeaway is that her 668 plus B, where she leaps in, the held version now is, quote, easier to interrupt. I find this a little bit abstracting and confusing because it's still pretty quick, but what I've noticed is that it it's not as, maybe it's not as active as quickly. So like maybe they slowed down the frames or something. Still a great move, but I've noticed a little more time to actually swat her out of it if I notice she's charging. And so that really felt good. The move was very, like, fantastic addition to her kit. It really bumped her up the tier list full on, like, rows alone, that move alone. But it felt a little ridiculous. Like, counterplaying that move was so difficult, and so they made it a hair easier, which I think was appropriate. And so now she's solid, right where she could be. She might even be higher on the tier list, but I do think that she's got some really tough matchups, and that's kind of what holds her back a bit in general. But fantastic character if you want to play the ninja. Next up, we have Geralt. Everyone seems to forget about this character, but he's still really solid. He's still really solid. Very basic, fundamental game plan. Great whiff punishment. Great meter use options. He can hit like a truck now with some of his new lethal hits that he gets for using his meter and spells. Or signs, rather. Great character. You really, like, if you want to have a pocket Geralt, I think that's a great character to have as a pocket because he's not too tricky to learn, and you can just kind of rely on skill to win with him and less about gimmicks or weaknesses. He's very well rounded in that respect. Not much to say about Geralt. Can't really go wrong with the character. A little boring to play though. Next up we have Tira. So Tira, also a character that has been getting better and better every single patch, and this one is no different. So for 6B plus K, which is her new move, or one of the new moves she got in Season 2, where she boots you, and it's this attack throw animation, where she spins the blade on your back and launches you across the stage, and then she can get a free taunt or a headbang for a mood swap. Really good move. That got buffed, so now you can kind of just use it. It's totally safe, and on counter hit, it does ridiculous damage. And like I said already, gives you a mood swap, so you can just keep throwing it out, all somewhat willy-nilly. The new low she got for Season 2, I believe it was, full crouch through 8, great poke low, like super irritating to deal with, relatively safe for what it's worth. Gloomy still does ridiculous damage, although they did nerf it a little bit. I believe the 3A, A plus B they nerfed, and that was obviously for her wall combos and her general whiff punishment, because alongside Sophie, Tira also had one of the best I-14 punishes in the game, and that was Gloomy 3A. And if you Gloomy 3A, A plus B, alone it does crazy damage, but if you wall splat with that, which is to the right, it's almost unfair. So I can understand the damage nerf in that respect. Tira also has a soul attack that can set up a mix-up, which is really, really good. Overall, really good kit, but I'll tell you this, very tough to play. Because Jolly Tira and Gloomy Tira quite legitimately have to be played two different ways. Because Jolly's frame data is a joke. Everything is punishable to some degree. Big, wide swinging, slow attacks. And that's fantastic movement. And that's why you'll see great Tiras when they're in Jolly. They tend to just move around and try to get you to whiff. And generate mood swaps with taunts and such. Because there is no Jolly offense. It's not worth it. It's not worth throwing out buttons if they could potentially be blocked. Whereas Gloomy, a little more offensive based. Fantastic crushing, but like Gloomy Tira has the best crushing moves in the game, period. You want tech crouches? Got you. Tech jumps? Got you. Tech sidestep? Got you. Like, Gloomy Tira, a force to be reckoned with, as it should be, but Jolly Tira, you have the life lead against Jolly Tira, you you kind of want to keep pressing it, because if you run away from her, she's just going to keep swapping moods. But you want to try your best to take advantage of when she's in Jolly as best you can. Really solid character. Really tough to play though. Not as bad as people say she is. Next up I have Astaroth. So this character, again, I really hate the fact I have him here. I really do. Let's move around to the end. But the truth is, he's not that bad. Okay? His matchup chart is very similar to Nightmares, and what I mean by that is not by who's good, who's bad, but you've got some ridiculously free matchups, but that goes both ways. Some characters are free to them, some characters free farm them. That's just the nature of those characters. In Astaroth's case, high risk, somewhat medium risk, high reward. He's a grappler character though, so you're going to keep on looping these +8 on break command throws over and over and over again. Very irritating to play against an Astaroth who just grabs constantly. He's a bit slow, very weak to lows, as his wall rising punishment, not great. He doesn't really have any crushing attacks, they're not great. But he's not low tier. He has some very fundamental tools that are absolutely fantastic. For example, Bull Rush, both versions, great moves. 6k, great move. That's his best rush tool. 2-2B, great button. Is horizontal mid, break attack, I don't know the input, great move. 5BA, great move. Right, like he's got some stuff that really hurts, and his counter hit game is very powerful. Again, +8 on break command throws both directions, and multiple different versions of those throws. Really scary character, but very coin flippy in nature. But I think that with Astaroth, you can make it work even if it's not really going your way. But I am going to bring him up to the A tier. I think the characters in the tier below, as Astaroth does round out the A tier for me, I think the characters below have more they have to deal with and have less of a reliable game plan. Whereas now that throws on break do chip damage, Astaroth is at least accomplishing something of a goal every time you break those grabs. So that's where I put Astaroth. That rounds it out for A. Moving on to A minus. So this one I already know right away that there's going to be a couple characters in this tier that are really controversial. But let me explain. So Siegfried is my first in A minus. Again, let's keep in mind that I could have easily made this list S, A, and B, and you probably wouldn't have batted an eye. But as soon as I put a plus and minus in front of it, you're like, what? Siegfried's not that bad. Remember, still a really good character. Okay, everyone in Caliber, for the most part, except for a few, we'll get there, are really good characters. Siegfried just keeps getting hit over and over and over. And I really think it's getting out of hand, to be honest. I worry that this character eventually is just going to become bottom 3 just because the community doesn't want to deal with this character. The two biggest things that suck for him now are his base hold B, the break attack from when he's crouching down. It doesn't track to either side now, whereas previously you used to have to either step one way or the other to either avoid the break attack or the shoulder charge. Now you just step to avoid the shoulder charge and you're going to avoid them both. But the other and more prominent nerf is his 3A4 cannot be used as a guard crush and has frankly basically zero pushback now. And that is a big deal because his only other Hori mid he has for the neutral is 2-2A, and that's very slow. And again, doesn't quite have the same pushback. So 3A4 getting hit in both ways that made it good, I think, is a very dramatic nerf. He still has Dark Legacy, and that's when Siegfried really shines. Without Dark Legacy, though, the character is not that good. But his comeback factor is very good. His soul charge is solid. His soul attack is solid. His CE is safe. Um, that's really cool. And great with Punisher as well. But yeah, the 3A4 hit is a big deal. And if people don't think it is, it really is. And so now this character is kind of stuck with having a fantastic uses of meter, as well as Dark Legacy. Dark Legacy keeps this character in the running no matter what. You can never, ever be done around against a Siegfried until you have AO'd him, because your life is always a threat, or at risk, when you're playing against Dark Legacy Siegfried. Next up I have Groh. So Groh, I think, is better than Groh players make him out to be. I really do. Kind of has the Siegfried problem though, and that's why I have him here. So when Groh is in Soul Charge, wow, really irritating character to fight, can be really strong. You cannot make a mistake against Groh in Soul Charge, because if you do, you're dead. Now you can step crouch or step duck the various teleport options that he has, but that's easier said than done, and the Groh can also bait that. He doesn't have to commit to attack, don't forget that. So it's not a B-Sol option, it's not just oh, his soul charge sucks now. No. Hits like a truck as well when he's in soul charge. It's brutal. But again, kind of like Siegfried, really needs that install mode, or in Groh's case, soul charge, to really make stuff happen. With that said, though, and his matchup chart, he struggles against characters with I-10s as they can stuff the Avenger transitions. With that said, if he's playing against a non-I-10 character, the character becomes a little more viable, flexible in terms of running an offense. So in that sense, he's not that bad. He's good against a good chunk of the cast. And his lethal hits, they're some of the easiest in the game in terms of their conditions that have to be met to get the lethal hit. He has a counter hit lethal hit, a whiffed attack lethal hit, moves a sidestepping whiffed vertical lethal hit, stuff like that, right? So he's very user friendly. He was designed that way. He's the new character in the game, so you can actually tell that they designed Groh around soul charge and lethal hits, and it definitely shows. Because when he's in soul charge or lethal hitting you, man does it hurt and man does it suck. But when not in soul charge, he's just a very ho-hum character, kind of like Geralt, except less threatening, worse neutral, less safe, worse with punishing. So outside of soul charge, what I'm trying to say is he's a worse Geralt, except he has the tacked on stance stuff that is okay at best. And that's my thoughts on Groh. Still a solid character though. Next up I have Talim. So this one is another one, much like Siegfried, I think this one's pretty controversial. I really don't think this character is that good. I really don't. And she has some really preposterous matchups. And I'll say this though, her 6k now being I-12, is amazing. It's an I-12 wall splat, which is crazy. That's really good. But it's not enough. It's not enough. Now, not saying I want them to overtune this character's stance game, because I think she is very hard to balance. I think without a doubt, her and Maxi are the hardest characters to properly and efficiently do. Because if you make Talim's stance stuff too powerful, she'll become too oppressive. And that's where it gets tricky. And so they didn't really touch the stances much, but they increased the range of her 6-6B, which is her Falcon Punch that lethal hits on backstep. That's really cool. Very annoying character, that's for sure. You have to remember that because her Wind Charmer doesn't actually evade verticals at all, basically, every time she goes into stance, she's taking a risk. Every single time. Pardon me. Yawned. Every single time. And so you have to remember that when you're playing against her. It's good to let a Talim essentially hang themselves. You don't really want to pressure into a Talim. kind of want to let them come to you. And if your character has auto GIs specifically for horizontals, man, you're laughing. Like, and most characters have an auto GI of some kind. So auto GIs really, really hurt Talim. Where she shines though is her damage output, both regular and in soul charge. Her reversal edge cancel is one of the only ones left in the game, and it's really good. And her critical edge. Her critical edge is a tech jump and is quote unquote safe on block, as she can cancel the last hit into a stance transition. But again, that's still a risk. Okay, so she's very risky. It's like a low medium risk for a medium high reward, but generally that is low medium and medium high. So if you play a very concise, like if you have good defense, Talim's gonna really struggle to open you up. And so she's gonna have to use her guard damage, which is pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but her lows aren't very good, and her throw game is whatever. It's not that good either. So I think she's fine though. Again, let's keep in mind this is A minus tier. Okay, I think these three characters are still really good. Okay. Moving on, we have Voldo. So Voldo, in my previous tier list, and for the longest time, we all thought he was the worst character in the game, and I think we were one of the worst characters in the game, and I think we were correct in saying that. But this most recent patch actually gave him a little more to work with. He still needs work, but now you at least have a solid character to fall back on. His 2-2A got some crazy buffs. His 1K is a lot faster. And some of his Mantis related Oki got faster and safer. So in general, he just got a little more tweaks to the well-roundedness of his kit, and I think that's exactly what Voldo needs. They previously his identity was just Mantis, just Oki, and then they gutted that stance hard, and they buffed a little bit of his neutral, and then they brought a little bit of love back into the stance, and now they brought a little bit of love back into the neutral. I think they're slowly getting there with Voldo, and I think he's in a pretty solid spot now. Again, might be tricky to tune because of his Mantis, but still a great character. Or I think he's a good character now. Anyway, great crushing attacks, some of the best in the game. 4K being a tech crouching launcher, it's crazy, crazy. Next up, we have Kilik. Kilik is a character who I'm going to factor in the same way as, or I'm going to talk about rather, the same way I talk about Groh. Because I think they're kind of one and the same, which is funny because, canon in the lore, but when Kilik is in Soul Charge, that's when he's pretty scary. But when he's not in Soul Charge, he just kind of has a big stick. Like he's got big stick power. You know what I'm saying? He just swings the stick and hopes for the best. But the problem with the stick is some of the best moves are punishable. And a lot of the strings can all be, like, for the most part, they can just be GI'd, right, reactively too. You don't even have to anticipate it. You have to play a very boring game of Soul Calibur to play Kilik properly. Very annoying low, right, via 4A. One of the best while rising moves in the game via 4 while rising B. His CE is also safe, granted it doesn't do that much damage. So he's a fine character. He's not a bad character. And I've said this before about Kilik. He's never been a bad character. It's just by Soul Calibur 6 standards, he doesn't have that X factor that's like, boom, this is why my character shines. But a very well-rounded kit. You can't go wrong with playing Kilik, but you might feel underpowered until you Soul Charge, and then he can kind of pop off a bit. So kind of like Siegfried and Groh, right? I kind of put Kilik in the same boat. Difference between them and him is that Siegfried is a little more gimmicky to get anything going, right? Groh just doesn't have the range of the other two, whereas Kilik can actually play at all ranges, and I think that's probably his greatest strength, is really solid pokes and great all-around character. And last up in A-, we have Azwel. So again, let me explain. They're all still in the A tier, okay? I just needed to flesh this out a bit. So within the A tier, I think Azwel is at the bottom, but he is still a really solid character. I hate this character. I do. I hate Azwel. I think a lot of people do. But I don't hate him for the reasons that other people necessarily hate him. Everyone talks about the axe low and the 3B and the spin to win soul charge, all that. It's none of that for me, actually. It's the fact that I can't see his weapon, and I know other people who share this sentiment. The fact we can't see his weapon, it in a way kind of fucks with our reaction time. We don't really know what's happening until it's happened, and that kind of bothers me a bit. You can't anticipate attacks because you could do anything, essentially. So I hate this character, but he just keeps getting hit and hit and hit. And really, the only thing people talk about now with Azwel are, oh, well, you have a pretty subpar shield low mix up and axe low. Yeah. Yeah, axe moves. Yeah. It's like, okay, but that's it? Yeah, kinda. His punishment sucks because it depends entirely on what stance he's in. Like, if he's not in sword, you're not getting punished, frankly. Like ever. Punishment sucks. His GI game sucks. His reversal edge is the worst in the game. It's awful. His soul charge fundamentally doesn't actually do anything other than give him access to his full kit for a brief moment, which is kind of like whatever. Plus, and I haven't talked about this yet with any of the characters because I didn't feel it necessary, uh, but I'll address it too. So for characters like Talim, Groh, uh, Siegfried, and even Mina, as well too, the fact that resist impact now removes a chunk of the soul gauge if you just use it against a soul charged opponent is a really big deal against Azwel and those other characters, but more so Azwel. Reason why is his soul, or yeah, the couple of soul charge attacks he has, the one that you're going to see the most is obviously 8-way run A plus B where he spins to win. It already uses so much of the soul gauge that if you RI that, it is 100% worth it. Like, you should do that because you're eating, I think, half of his bar if that interaction happens, which is crazy. Crazy. 8A used to be one of his best moves. It was his Hori mid that would go into sword. Because it's a jumping attack, he didn't need to be in sword for it to come out at the same frames. They nerfed it. In general, his jumping mix-up of like 8A, 8B, it's not a mix-up. They're very telegraphed. Just GI them both. So yeah, Axe low and 3B, 6-6B, 3A, and full crouch 3B are they're all axe attacks, and that's all this character has now is basically 5 moves. Like, he's not that good anymore. But man, is he annoying if he every time you get axe load, there's a part of you inside that just dies. You're like, oh, really? It hit me again. But I really don't think he's that good. I was even tempted to put him into B tier. I'm not sold on that notion yet, so we'll keep him there for now. But that's gonna do it for my A- tier. First up in the B tier, I have Haohmaru. So Haohmaru, before this patch, I actually thought he wasn't that bad. Like, pre-patch, I would have put him maybe like here, ish. But now, he just, I don't know. He doesn't seem like I've fought now. There's not that many Haohmarus, but I've fought them all now, enough to where I can kind of comment on it. The backstep isn't enough. Like, yeah, his movement is really good, but I'm gonna be honest with you. That's it. Like, that's kind of all this character has. Like, you can talk about, oh, his heavy slash damage Zedd, his 6B range Zedd, his I-10 CE Zedd from different conditions, but the truth of the matter is, he hits like a truck on one-off opportunities. I'm not really ever getting like, I don't know. I'm just never threatened by Haohmaru. He just does stuff on the screen, and granted, he's not as punishable as he looks, but it's kind of all for naught. Like, he's not that scary. And that's the problem. He's kind of like, kind of like Kilik in that sense. Is like nothing you're doing I'm really concerned about. So it's not that I think Haohmaru is bad. It's that I think he's just very underpowered right now. I think I know what they wanted to do. You can see that they wanted to make him this like heavy slash 2D character, and that's why they gave him such a good backstep. But he's a little fat, so he can't sidestep for shit. And I get it. I appreciate that gimmick, but I want them to maybe readdress him, and that's also again why his 6B is so good, because again 2D space, right? Um, Problem with his Ronin cancels is all of the good ones are vertical for the most part. So if you have a vertical auto GI, you can kind of abuse it. Previously, his 214K, which was the Jug Slam, where he goes right here, that used to not be a weapon attack, and that was actually a really big deal, particularly in the Xianghua matchup. But now that it was apparently a bug and it's now a weapon attack, it's not that good. Um, so yeah, he has some stuff to play with. Don't get me wrong. Like every character in Caliber does, but it's just not enough. I really don't think he's that good right now. I think with some tweaks he could be better, but he's just not there for me right now. And for the record, I played against fantastic players who were piloting this character, knowing very little about the matchup myself. I don't have much experience yet, and I was still doing really well. Rather than when they would play their other main characters where I had a harder time. So, yeah, sure, comfort and experience is a factor there, but I don't think he's that great. Next up, I have Mitsurugi. Holy man, they just keep nerfing this character for no reason. Like, I don't even know what to say about this character. I never see him anymore. I think I'd probably get wrecked by a Rugi player today because nobody plays him anymore, and for good reason. His damage keeps getting hit. His relic, I think the stance is called, where he has the GI, where he pulls his sword out and it's like slash slash slash. That shit, they nerfed the damage on that. So previously you used to not want to swing into that stance transition because it actually hit you pretty good. But now I think they reduced it by 14 damage, which you might be like, that doesn't sound like a lot. It is, actually. It's a big deal. So now swinging into that stance is more effective than it used to be. They killed his damage in a bunch of different positions, and so now like his lows are so risky, and that's always the thing with Rugi is like, yes, has that 3B lethal hit against a crouching opponent, but holy man, it's because his lows are such a risk to use, and he just keeps getting hit over and over and over. With that said, he's still like every touch that Rugi does generally does more than other characters. So, you know, if you get whiff punished or even regular punished by Rugi, it's doing more damage than most of the other characters. So he still hits hard, quote unquote, even with the damage nerfs, but it was so unnecessary. Like he is getting unnecessarily hit over and over and over. And so just keeps dropping. Still a playable character though. Again, that's just Caliber. But man, he doesn't live up to the Soul Calibur 6 standards these days, like at all. And so I want them to refocus with Rugi. They're hitting him too much, and I think they need to fix it. And of course, that leaves us with arguably the hottest take that has always been the case on my tier list ever since the dawn of time, because nobody understands this character or agrees with me. We have Maxi. Oh boy. Maxi went from being a dumpster fire character to a playable decent character, all the way back to a dumpster fire character as of right now. So, in Season 2, they gave Maxi much better frame data on some of his stance moves and transitions, which was awesome. They gave him Heaven's Guard, which was a catch-all option, but for meter, and so you couldn't just low him to death. And you couldn't re-GI it, so it was just like, boom, you're dead, into full lethal hit combo, or CE. And then they gave him 7-star Rebirth, where a couple of his key moves become break attacks and plus. A lot of stuff. And yet he was still trash. Like, for the most part, he was still awful. But now they've nerfed the Heaven's Guard, so the window is tiny. It's borderline useless, and you can re-GI it now. So, like, it's basically Season 1 Maxi with slightly better frame data now. And so, God, he sucks. Like, you can challenge him no matter what. Like, almost every swap and transition and everything he does can just be swatted into. It is such a medium high risk for low medium reward character. It sucks. Like, it sucks. Playing Maxi sucks. Because you are relegated now to using like single moves. Don't even bother stancing. Is what I'm trying to say. Don't even bother stancing. His 1B is a pretty solid low, but in some matchups he can't even use it on hit. Okay, on hit. Against, I know for a fact that Raphael and Talim can completely delete the character on hit if he uses 1B. That is appalling. Like, that is absurd. Okay. A lot of his stuff you can swing into no matter what. Some of the most common characters in the game are some of his worst matchups. His neutral is it's serviceable, but it's not great. So if he can't stance and can't neutral, he can't do anything. Heaven's Guard is not worth the amount of meter it costs. You basically can whiff it by accident and like hit Maxi by accident, because if you go to swing and the move's too slow, Heaven's Guard just isn't going to work. Like, this character sucks. And if you disagree with me, then frankly I'm going to call you out and say you don't know the matchup like at all, because this character is dog shit. And if you don't believe me with the character you're playing, just pick a character like Xianghua, Raphael, Nightmare, Talim, Amy, Siegfried, Groh. Like, there are so many garbage matchups for Maxi to deal with, it's not even funny. And yeah, there you have it. That's my tier list. Again, every character in Caliber is playable except for maybe Maxi right now. Holy shit. I kind of wanted to put him on his own tier, but then you're just getting ridiculous. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good rest of your day.